So I just finished up the complete guide to computer flipping, a rather arduous task that took me quite a while, but one of the tools that I used, the test SSD, in one of those videos got a fair bit of comments. A lot of people were pointing out that this is a very easy solution that, a bunch of different tech channels and flippers and YouTubers and all that fun stuff use, and that they were interested in exactly what I have on it so that they could maybe replicate it or have some ideas for the future or things of that nature. So that's precisely what this video is going to be, going over one of the tools that I use most besides, I guess, my screwdriver, and showing you exactly how I use it, when I use it, and the things that are on the SSD itself. So the actual SSD that I use is the PNY CS900. It is a 2.5 inch SSD, and the reason that I use a 2.5 versus an M.2 drive is when working with older systems, SATA is always the easiest way to go. You might come into some motherboards that don't have an M.2 drive, so I always prefer using a SATA drive if I'm going to be using it in a bunch of different older and newer hardware. The actual storage is 1 terabyte, and the reason that I went with that, it's roughly $100 right now to get a 1 terabyte SSD. The reason that I went with 1 terabyte is this has to hold all the different games and applications and benchmarks and Windows to test all my computers, and that way it's very easy to transfer. I don't have to worry about having the games on a separate hard drive or anything like that. So it's a little bit of an investment to have a $100 tool, but considering how much I use this, it's easily earned back its cost. So that's why it's a little bit larger and a little bit more expensive. You could potentially get away with maybe like a 500 gigabyte SSD, but with the size that games are nowadays, that might kind of be pushing it. But now, what are the actual tools, games, benchmarks, all those fun things that I have on this SSD? Obviously, I have a fresh install of Windows 10 on there. That way I can just plug it into any system and immediately boot into a Windows 10 operating system that I know is fully functional and has no issues. One of the really nice benefits of that is whenever you're dealing with troubleshooting, such as if you sell a computer to a customer and then they're having issues, and you think that it's potentially a Windows issue, such as something they installed or drivers being corrupted or anything involving Windows, you can simply plug in this SSD with a known good Windows installation and make sure that Windows is not a variable. So there is a good and active Windows 10 installation on here. That's obviously the base. And then besides that, I have all the different games and benchmarks that I use. So that includes Steam, Battle.net games, Origins, Epic Games, that kind of things, different launchers you might need. And then the different games like GTA 5, Red Dead Redemption 2, Call of Duty Warzone, Fortnite, all the different games that I run through, and then benchmarks such as Superposition or Unigine Haven or 3D Mark Time Spy. Any of the tools or benchmarks that I use are on here at all times, and they're always kept up to date because whenever I plug them into a system, it will automatically update. So that's where I keep all the games and whatnot, and so I don't have to spend an entire night letting all the games download on the local storage of the device. I simply just have it ready to pop in and go. But besides all of that, which obviously is the biggest aspect of this little tool, is being able to have all my game benchmarks kind of passed around, is the applications and tools that are on here that I use. The main one that I've gone over in a multitude of different videos, including the complete computer guide or complete computer flipping guide, is MSI Afterburner and RivaTuner, or RivaTuner, don't quite know how everyone pronounces that, but basically what that tool does is it lets you monitor all the different temperatures and clock speeds and all the fun stuff going on in your computer in a very easy and digestible manner. And then RivaTuner, or RiviTuna, whatever you want to tuna, RivaTuna, a river tuna. But RivaTuner, or RivaTuner, I'm going to go with RivaTuner. That allows a little display to pop over any sort of game or benchmark that you're running, so you can actively monitor the different usages and clock speeds and whatnot while you're actually gaming without having to have two monitors or clicking back and forth. So that makes it very simple and easy to do. And also, this tool is probably the biggest tool on my SSD. It is what I use to actually get the benchmark numbers for whatever game I'm running, and you can set up hotkeys in MSI Afterburner to benchmark whatever section of a game you're doing, and then have that save into a text file for you. It's very nice. I'm sure there's guides and whatnot on it. But MSI Afterburner and River Tuna is an absolute necessity tool that I use all the time, so that's also installed on this SSD. After that, there's only a few smaller tools that I use, but I do keep them on here because they're actually invaluable when you need them and you potentially don't have access to the internet to grab them. And the first one of those is Ati Flash. Basically, this little program allows you to replace, read, write, load, save VBIOSes on graphics cards. I don't have to use this all that often, but occasionally I will get a graphics card in that has a different VBIOS on it than it should. And so having that application ready to go and being able to easily put on the actual VBIOS that should be on the card is invaluable. So I have that on here. It's a very small program. It's just something that I need every so often. So that's ready to go. Then there is DDU, which is Display Driver Uninstaller. This is very important since this SSD is going to see a multitude of different graphics cards with different companies switching back from AMD to NVIDIA and all that fun stuff. What you need to do if you're switching between cards is go ahead and uninstall the display drivers for those cards so they don't get mixed up and confused. So having DDU on here whenever you're switching is a very valuable tool to have. It just basically wipes clean any display drivers on the systems, and then you would shut the system down, put the new card in, and you're ready to go. So that's also a very valuable tool that is on the SSD. And then finally, one that's probably a bit more suitable for just my use case, but I use absolutely all the time, is a program called Input Director. What this allows me to do is if this test SSD is hooked up to any of the systems that I'm currently working on, it can go through my local network where both of my computers, both the test computer and my personal computer are hooked up to, and it can read the keyboard and mouse from my personal desk as the keyboard and mouse for the test computer. What that allows me to do is instead of having to have two different computer setups, I simply just have a third monitor on my desk and I can use my main keyboard and mouse on both computers. It's very easy. It lets me access stuff very quickly. It keeps the setup much cleaner. But that is a tool that I use all the time. It's very nice. It might not be applicable to absolutely everybody because it is kind of a niche use case. So Input Director, very useful for me, might be useful for you, but that's another tool that is on here installed and ready to go, so I never have to worry about plugging a mouse or keyboard into the test system. Then finally, to wrap this all up, it's not going to be an incredibly long list because, mainly the big list of this is the games and whatnot that are on it, but the last tool on here is Furmark. What that allows me to do is Furmark comes with a GPU stress test and a CPU stress test that's very easy to set up. So what I'll basically do whenever I'm trying to stress the thermals of a system, because Furmark and CPU burner aren't the best for testing stability, but testing thermals is a very easy thing to do with this. You'll set up the GPU and CPU stress test, and I'll leave the computer running overnight to make sure there are no thermal issues with the computer running under heavy load all night and making sure it's still running perfectly fine in the morning. And you can go back into MSI Afterburner and look back through the history and see if you had any sort of issues thermally, so you don't have to just rely on what you see when you first come back to it. So that basically wraps up the list. There are other things on here that I didn't think were worth mentioning but are on the SSD, such as hardware information or CPU-Z or GPU-Z, basically small applications that just kind of allow me to troubleshoot things a little bit closer here and there, but they aren't essential to list on this, so they're kind of just in the background. But those are the main tools I use for this. It allows me to very quickly set up benchmark test computers. It also allows me to eliminate variables if I think storage or hard drive is the issue in the computer that I get. So very invaluable tool that I have in my toolkit. I would suggest anyone doing computer flipping or a lot of computer work to have something similar to this. You might not need something exactly like this, but probably one of the best $100 I've ever spent, and this poor little guy is going to go through many more computers, so hopefully that answers all the questions that people had about the test SSD that I use. So that brings us to the end of the information of this video. Hopefully that answered all your questions. I have a small little announcement before I bring us to the actual outro, and that is I'm releasing a Discord server for everybody to join. It's Not anything super fantastical quite yet, but my plan was to release a Discord server at around 2,000 subscribers, which we're very, very close to at this point. So I thought I would kind of mention it here in case a few people wanted to get on, try it, feel it out, so I can kind of get the initial push figured out and dealt with. And then once we actually hit 2,000, I'll do a more formal release of the Discord server. But just thought I would mention that. The link to join the server will be down below in the description, and then following all the videos from here will probably be linked in the description as well. But I hope you learned something. If you did, hit that like button. If you think that this is a waste of $100 and is absolutely unnecessary, hit that dislike button. But if you want to see any more of the PC flipping tools, adventures, advice, stories, and all that fun stuff, hit that subscribe button. I will try my best to keep you around. Without further ado, have a good day, guys.